2,000 acre plot of land. But I did think it was incumbent upon me to promote energy in Prince William County. And so that's where this comes from, because somehow I got started watching the internet, and I learned that there was a three-letter word after SMR, didn't know what it was, small nuclear reactor was what it was. And what it's based on, it's a factory-generated thing we build in factories and deliver to sites. And if you're interested in it, the internet has a huge amount of information on it. We have been disappointed a little bit, a lot, I guess you say, because one of our speakers has got a personal issue at home that he cannot attend. So we're going to depend on our moderators, Jack Kamujin, who has just won a national award. Did I lose my paper?
Yep.
Jack is a member of our committee that I've known since the early 80s. And he's rightfully very proud of receiving a United States award from on February 14th. He was the honored recipient of the 2024 National Environmental Achievement Award from the NEAA, Environment, by the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. And the true bureaucrat with all these. The bio on our speakers, and even the ones that we did that failed, that could not make it. You can go to the committee website, the Committee of 100 website, Prince William County, and it's all there, nice, neatly, set up for you. Also, if you want to see a republished program, and pages of information that he's going to give you. So let me turn this over to Jack. If he's done eating, are you done eating, Jack?
Well,
no? Okay, well, I'll keep talking until he gets done eating. You're going to quit. Okay, he's going to quit eating as you talk. Jack, would you like to take over this conversation on nuclear power for Prince William County? Thank you all.
yeah, as a young engineer, I worked in a nuclear research reactor, and never expecting to have these experiences. I was hired to come in and work. Now this goes back, like Tony was saying, Jack has been in the field longer than he'll admit. Well, I will say this facility had gobs of physicists that were there. And I know David's smiling because of his physics background. And it was interesting because the physicists, for instance, at lunchtime, I remember 4 physicists, they made up a quartet. And at lunchtime, they'd take a break, they'd go up the second floor lab in the soundproof room. This is in the Army now. And they would play classical music from lunch. So they'd have the violin, the cello, the oboe, whatever. And that was their form of relaxing. And then they worked on very, very what might consider esoteric things, in the physics arena. But they took their break with classical music, and so it was interesting. I can digress a little because of our speaker in Maryland, that Donald Hoffman he's had an emergency at home, and he may make it. We'll see what happens. But when I was hired to upgrade drawings for the Atomic Energy Commission approval at the time. That was predating the NRC. And the Army couldn't upgrade their power. They couldn't go from 1 megawatt to, say, for instance, 10 megawatts without having all the documentation, all the T's crossed, I's dotted, and the documentation had to be perfect. And their documentation was less than stellar, so I was hired as a young engineer to come in and upgrade all their drawings for safety equipment upgrades they did over the years. And then, and so that was my job. And when I got in there, for the first week, I got sucked away by the physicists to work on experiments for them. And so I came back the second summer to do what I was originally hired on the first summer. So I just wanted to digress a little. And then, but later on in my career, now that was a young engineer. I was working on a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. I never thought I would be in that situation, but that's what it is. And so then later on, when I worked, I ended up getting a bachelor's. I thought that was it, but I ended up getting a PhD in environmental engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, Troy, New York. And had I known what I would be doing at EPA, I would have taken radiation health physics courses at RPI. I ended up becoming what's called the designated federal officer for the Radiation Advisory Committee for 18 years in the office of the EPA Administrator and the Science Advisory Board. So we would look at risk calculations, carcinogenic risk from radionuclides, and all sorts of things. So I looked at the radiation monitoring system we had in place for detecting fallout in the United States. So, and we would do science reviews. So in the Science Advisory Board, we do reviews that would go directly to the EPA administrator. Whoever was there at the time would scratch his or her head over, well, what's the science behind this? And so that's why those committees were there to provide that advice directly to the administrator. It was not a bureaucratic thing. It was definitely science at work. And I have to say, it was quite an experience. So here we are. So I digress a little because of the speaker situation. We're coming up on April 22nd, 2024. It's the 54th anniversary of Earth Day, and Senator Gaylord Nelson is widely attributed to be the founder of Earth Day. He was former governor of Wisconsin and U.S. Senator. And so here we are, and I just wanted to offer a couple of quotes from Senator Nelson as we look at this field in nuclear power. We have a role of stewardship to play here as technical people, as environmentalists, as physicists, engineers. We all play a role to make the world a safer place for all of us. And we want the benefits of technology, and we want to minimize the risks to the public. And those working in the field in radiation want to be able to retire as healthy individuals. So we want to be careful, in terms of exposures and health and safety for the workers in the field, as well as the public. All of that is part of the package. So Senator Gaylord Nelson said one quote was, "Our goal is not just an environment of clean water and scenic beauty. The objective is an environment of decency, quality, mutual respect for all other human beings and all other living creatures." So we care about the people, we care about the environment, and we want to make sure that our footprint is minimal regarding adverse impacts. Another quote that he had, "The ultimate test for man's conscience may be his willingness to sacrifice today for future generations whose words of thanks will not be heard." In other words, we're doing our best so that we have a legacy of positive things that we leave behind when we're here on this earth. And I think that's a really laudable goal, especially for professionals that know the subject matter, want to do their best to make sure that Earth is a better place for all. Well, tonight you will not get a lecture on radiation health physics. You will not have to listen to experts talk about radiation units, such as sieverts. Now, sievert is a radiation dose absorbed by the body measured in millisieverts. A millisievert or REM, or 1 REM equals 10 millisieverts. But okay, that's it for you. You're not going to get much more than that. A unit of radiation dose in gray is the radiation equivalent of 1 joule per kilogram. And you can tuck that away and not worry about knowing that in a test. Or that radiation activity is measured by an international unit called the becquerel. You will not have to know about instruments and dosimeters that are calibrated in sieverts or grays or understand alpha, beta, or gamma radiation, unless David Winks brings it up, he might, or Rankine equivalent man. And one wonders in this day and age why they didn't come up with Rankine equivalent women, but that's a joke between physicists here. But hopefully you better understand that radiation and nuclear benefits, as well as issues, are all around us and are a part of our lives. You undoubtedly heard of the things, we've had disastrous events in this world. You've heard about undoubtedly the BP spill in Alaska. That was in March 2006 when BP spilled approximately 5,000 barrels of crude oil on the north slope of Alaska. And you've heard about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. That occurred in April of 2010. You've probably heard of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans back in 2005. And that was a large Category 4 hurricane. So we have issues all around us, and they need to be managed in society. So we've had natural disasters, we've had man-made disasters, and recently we've experienced the failure of at the Baltimore Francis Scott Key Bridge just this March, when a container ship lost power. And well, radiation has its pluses and minuses along with natural man-made disasters and what we call risk management. So I bring that up because we deal with risk management all the time, not just in the nuclear, particularly in the nuclear field, but not just in that area. It's all around us that we have to deal with it. And if you take a broad brush view of radiation, just think of the effort it took to create the bombs that dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It ended World War II. It saved more lives than it took. But I will say, 78,000 instantly died in Hiroshima, 40,000 instantly died in Nagasaki, and over 40,000 were injured from the after effects of radiation, and you can go on. But it would have been, we were learning as a country about the effects of radiation. The first above-ground atomic bomb testing occurred in 1945. 200 was a radioactive fall right over the upstate Albany, New York. Had 3 sites primarily in the U.S. at Hanford, Washington, Los Alamos, New Mexico, and Oakland, and talked to the modelers there and worked on actually how long will it take for some of that stuff to go off-site. And I will say that the Columbia River is the most radioactive river in the United States. This is proximity to Hanford. And it's estimated that we have about 200 contaminated groundwater at that site. So we have to be aware of and big accidents that occur, like 3 Mile Island. We had Chernobyl in Ukraine 38 years ago, back in 1986. Now the Russians that were there were requiring testing at a low power, but the whole thing got out of control. It was really nasty, and I'm not going to dwell on this. We can if we want, and then of course we had Fukushima in 2011, fairly recent, 13 years ago. Now, that was caused by a tsunami. The engineers never imagined a tsunami that big that could occur, and and we're still dealing with all of that. So, and then we do have the Yucca Mountain nuclear waste repository, and there's a lot of detail. I'm not going to go into the detail, but there are pros and cons of that, and I can give you 20 plus reasons why Yucca Mountain is not considered as appropriate as a radioactive long-term waste repository, but you can also have 20 reasons why it might work there too. But so we're going to leave that and do that in Q&A. But but we do have the situation that Yucca Mountain creates for the nuclear industry, and that is that the transuranic waste from nuclear weapons production and waste isolation power plant, like for the defense efforts that we had, and the nuclear plants, we don't have a place for long-term permanent storage. So we're all dealing with that. So all the plants in the U.S., we have to deal with it. So so we have a lot of issues that we have to be aware of. Let me just turn the page here. A lot of issues that we have to be aware of. End up with not having a power shortage, but that's another road to cross for the other generations. About 70-ish% of energy consumed comes 10% comes from wind power, 7% from hydro. There was one thing that keep in mind when President Obama said all options are on the table. He was including nuclear in there, and when he did that, the price of uranium ore went up about 5 times, and the industry got very interested in going back to the old mines. So when I was in the Science Advisory Board, part of my job was to bring in experts to weigh in on that subject and give advice to the administrator. And we did do that, and that was quite an experience. I do want to say that here we have nuclear power plants that are, you've got some very large ones. The large conventional reactors are 700 megawatts and larger, generally. The small modular reactors, so there are some very interesting things about SMRs. They are an electricity generation source that has yet to be pumped storage. So the U.S. NRC has so far approved one design for that nuclear has. So nuclear truly has the potential to reach out and provide for enormous power demands, whereas renewables cannot do that. They're part of the solution, however. So structure in place at North Anna. It has the security, it has the transmission lines, and it has the workforce. It's got all the elements to do something. So for whatever, food for thought. Now Canada, Ontario Power Generation, plans for 4 SMRs, and the first of those is under construction right now with a projected date of 2028. So here we are, 2024. So I would say, even with delays, we're looking at 4 or 5 years down the road that an SMR will be in Canada at generating power. About 60% of the province in Canada, the power currently comes from nuclear. So they've made a major commitment in that area. Locally here in Virginia, there's a demand for power from data centers and a question whether renewables can meet that need. And I brought up the energy density is clearly in favor of nuclear rather than renewables. I look forward to hearing what David has to say. I would like to introduce David at this time, and I'm going to just give a brief descriptor for David, and because the bio is available, his lengthy bio is there. He is a physicist. He has to say on the subject. With that.
Thank you very much.
Should I was going to introduce you.
Well, Rob and I wind up at a lot of different events, a lot of times educating folks on Capitol Hill about different topics. Certainly. Is that better? Okay. So Rob and I always make a great team. He'll address some of the business and congressional issues, and I'll do my best to address some of your questions in terms of the technical issues. Who here is familiar with nuclear power plants? Actually seen one or driven by one, or maybe seen pictures of one? Most of the time, that when you think of that, you think of big, tall cooling towers, and you think of great big facilities that make a gigawatt of energy. And for 90 plants around the country, that's true. That's what they look like. And most of those are probably 50 years old, in design. Fortunately, we've learned a few things, and we'll share with you sort of the approach to new nuclear. Rob, before I jump into things, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, David. Honored to be here as a member, and also have been working on SMRs for about 12 years, and worked in nuclear power for longer than that. SMRs and nuclear pretty much carbon-free and the best available power in the United States. And we've operated, even though we had 3 Mile Island, no radiation